From the outside, Aram Shaybani was the picture of modern success. A property investor with a fleet of Bentleys, original Warhols on his walls, and regular posts from beach clubs and rooftop terraces across Europe. To his neighbours in Bowden, Greater Manchester, he was a quiet professional who enjoyed the finer things. But behind the £5 million portfolio and tailored suits was one of the UK's most elusive criminal kingpins. Over 2 decades, Shaybani built a facade of legitimacy using forged paperwork, fake identities, and luxury investments. But his true wealth came from the shadows: forged mortgage deals, high-purity cocaine sourced from Colombia, and encrypted phones used to run an international trafficking operation. He operated without a known employer, tax records, or visible income stream. Everything was hidden behind offshore nominees, shell companies, and digital silence. By the time police burst into his luxury flat at 6 a.m., the illusion was crumbling. Military-grade encrypted devices were flushed, crypto codes hidden, and safes filled with cash cracked open. It wasn't just a fraud case. It was the unraveling of an empire built on deception, laundering, and Class A drugs, and the beginning of a takedown that would leave no part of his myth untouched. Aram Shaybani didn't start with drugs. His rise began with property fraud, a quieter, less visible crime that gave him the illusion of success. Between 1999 and 2010, he declared earnings only 5 times, each linked directly to mortgage applications. Those applications were padded with lies, doctored payslips, false employment records, and counterfeit P60s. He wasn't working, but the banks didn't know that. They approved high-value loans, convinced he was a well-paid professional. With that false financial credibility, Shaybani bought up real estate in Manchester, London, and Marbella, but the properties were rarely in his name. He used a network of nominees, family members, friends, and even unwitting associates, to make the purchases. Once secured, ownership would quietly revert to him, often through paper-only transactions where no money visibly changed hands. This network of transfers and shell ownership made the trail nearly impossible to follow. Some homes were bought outright in cash. Others were mortgaged using third-party names and forged income records. In Kensington, a £1.7 million flat appeared in his control without any visible payment. Each deal was slightly different, always just enough to avoid patterns. Detectives would later call it laundering through architecture. Every property had layers: fake documents, hidden transfers, fabricated income. He wasn't just hiding money, he was building a profile, the appearance of a successful, high-net-worth investor. The scam didn't just fool banks, it built credibility. Neighbors, lenders, even friends believed he was self-made. And with this credibility, Shaybani laid the foundation for something bigger. The homes were more than investments, they were safe houses, cash storing vaults, and staging points for something far more serious. By the end of the decade, he held over £5 million in real estate. But there were no tenants, no receipts, no tax returns. Just a paper empire backed by silence and criminal ambition. With his real estate facade in place, Aram Shaybani expanded his reach, not just into more properties, but into serious organized crime. The key was scale. Shaybani didn't deal in street-level sales. His contacts and operations pointed to wholesale trafficking, with cocaine arriving in bulk and vanishing into UK distribution channels. The breakthrough came from his travel history. Between 2012 and 2015, he took frequent trips: Dubai, Amsterdam, Marbella. But in December 2013, he flew to Colombia. Unlike other holidays, there were no social media posts, no photos, no club check-ins. For a man who documented everything, that silence stood out. And to police, it wasn't just suspicious, it was telling. Colombia, long associated with the highest grade cocaine and major trafficking networks, wasn't a coincidence. Detectives believe this was the moment Shaybani moved from laundering to sourcing. He wasn't just hiding money anymore. He was securing supply, meeting exporters, building trust, and establishing import routes. Following that trip, UK purchases consistent with large-scale drug distribution began to appear. Packaging materials, industrial vacuum sealers, acetone, gloves, all items associated with repackaging bulk cocaine for sale. He bought in weight, not grams, suggesting he was a key UK contact for overseas producers. To coordinate this, Shea Barney used encrypted phones, including Encrypted devices, under aliases like IronKey. These weren't casual communications. They were tools built for secrecy, able to self-wipe on command, and operating through military-grade encryption. He rarely used standard channels. Most of his communication was dark, secured, untraceable, and off-grid. He also invested in infrastructure. Flats in prime locations were adapted into storage and repackaging hubs. Cash counting machines, sealers, and wrap were found hidden inside what looked like luxury homes. He built redundancy, multiple devices, multiple identities, and layers of deniability. His financial operation mirrored this complexity. Money moved through crypto wallets, shell companies, and offshore accounts. Properties were refinanced, assets transferred, everything layered. On paper, nothing connected. In reality, it was a tight, well-controlled network, run with precision and caution. Shea Barney's empire was global in ambition and professional in execution. And with every layer of disguise, he grew bolder, convinced that money, silence, and technology would keep him untouchable. Shea Barney wasn't just rich, he was deliberate. Every aspect of his life was curated to reinforce the myth. Luxury cars, designer clothing, cosmetic surgery, gallery-grade artwork. He didn't just launder money, he broadcasted success. But unlike most criminals, he did so without attracting early suspicion. That was his power. He performed wealth convincingly. He drove a Porsche Panamera and 2 Bentleys. He wore Rolexes, lived in high-end flats in Bowdoin and Kensington, and holidayed in Ibiza and Los Angeles. In LA, he spent over £45,000 on hair transplant surgery, followed by further cosmetic work in Istanbul. Veneers, tailored suits, 5-star bookings, all paid for in cash. To anyone watching, he was simply thriving. Social media reinforced this. Photos were carefully composed, branded clothes always visible, expensive settings always implied. Faces of companions were cropped. There were never any office shots, no signs of work, no clients, just leisure, luxury, and movement. He posted from rooftops, beach resorts, hotel balconies, never from meetings or business events. Friends believed his money came from property or currency trading. The story held up until the numbers didn't. There were no tenants, no company registrations, no traceable income. But by then, Shea Barney had already established himself, and most people didn't ask questions. His control extended to his technology. He operated multiple encrypted phones, some destroyed during raids, others never recovered. 2 Encrypted devices were smashed and flushed before police reached him. He refused to reveal passwords, even when ordered by the court. 1 phone recovered from a drain still held fragments of his crypto recovery codes. Inside his homes, police found security layers, safes hidden in walls, cash counting machines, sealed evidence of large-scale drug storage. The items were ordinary on their own: vacuum sealers, gloves, acetone. But together, they formed a quiet production line. He wasn't preparing for arrest, he was preparing for longevity. Shea Barney's empire relied on one principle: control, over his image, his assets, his contacts, and his information. And for nearly 2 decades, it worked. He made people believe he was a legitimate millionaire. In truth, he was the architect of a highly profitable, carefully protected criminal network. And nobody saw the cracks until it was too late. For years, Shea Barney's control was near total, but silence can only protect so much. While friends, banks, and neighbours believed the performance, Greater Manchester Police's Economic Crime Unit began looking deeper. They weren't just following suspicions, they were following patterns. Unexplained wealth, frequent overseas travel, and assets outpacing income by millions. The first clue came from HMRC Records. Despite owning property worth over £5 million, Shaybani had almost no taxable income. What few declarations he'd made were tied to fraudulent mortgage applications. That alone didn't prove guilt, but it prompted questions, serious ones. Officers started mapping his financial and digital footprint. The more they looked, the more inconsistencies appeared. Luxury flats held in nominee names, loan repayments made in cash, artwork purchased with no documented income. Then came the travel data, dozens of international flights, often booked under aliases or through third parties. One trip in particular stood out. Colombia, December 2013. Unlike his flashy holidays, this one left no trace. And for a man who broadcasted everything, that silence was deafening. Investigators began connecting it to rising drug activity in Manchester. Packaging supplies, coded communications, and financial flows aligned with major shipments. Further cracks came from his encrypted devices. Despite smashing and flushing multiple EncroChat phones, forensic teams recovered fragments. One contained a crypto recovery phrase linked to over £1.5 million in digital currency. Another held partial access to shell company records. While full decryption proved impossible, surrounding metadata, receipts, synced emails, mirrored backups, painted a fuller picture. It wasn't just about the money, it was the infrastructure, carefully layered but not invisible. Police raids on his Bowden and Kensington flats revealed Class A and B drugs, cash counting machines, and hidden safes. Safety deposit boxes held over £1 million in clean banded notes. Receipts from Ibiza and Dubai matched dates on passport stamps and crypto transfers. Every lie that built the empire left a shadow. Inconsistencies in paperwork, gaps in timelines, properties transferred without funds. Shaybani thought his silence and tech would protect him, but investigators weren't relying on confessions. They relied on data, and Shaybani's world, once so carefully managed, had started to collapse under the weight of its own contradictions. It was just after 6 a.m. on Tuesday, the 9th of April 2019, when the door came off its hinges. A pre-dawn raid by GMP and national units targeted multiple addresses across the UK and abroad. The focus? Aram Shaybani's penthouse in Bowden, Greater Manchester. A converted church marketed as executive living. When police entered, Shaybani was already in the bathroom, trying to flush a smashed encrypted phone down the toilet. He was arrested in his boxer shorts. The flat was anything but modest. Inside, officers found £60,000 in cash, cocaine, designer goods, and crypto recovery phrases written on slips of paper. Artwork by Banksy and Warhol hung on the walls. Originals, later confirmed to be bought with criminal profits. What had seemed like the home of a high flyer turned out to be a front for organised crime. Simultaneously, police hit a second flat in Kensington, West London. That one held what officers called a party box, a stash of ecstasy, cocaine, and MDMA, alongside more luxury artwork and encrypted devices. 3 safety deposit boxes were accessed shortly after, revealing over £1 million in clean cash, some still in bank bands. Each location pointed to a man who was not just living large, but managing a sophisticated operation designed to survive scrutiny. Further raids abroad, including properties in Ibiza, uncovered tenancy documents, foreign transactions, and physical evidence of cross-border movement. Every location served a purpose: cash storage, logistics, or clean fronts to move dirty money. Investigators didn't stop with seizures. They went deeper. Thousands of emails, duplicate accounts, receipts, and photos were recovered. Travel records matched with high-value spending. Crypto trails were partially decoded, linking Shaybani to wallets loaded with criminal proceeds. Despite his silence, the structure was unraveling. Shaybani refused to unlock any of the encrypted devices, but the sheer volume of circumstantial and forensic evidence overwhelmed any gaps. The data was conclusive. He hadn't just profited from crime, He had engineered a lifestyle and infrastructure to keep it going indefinitely. For nearly 20 years, he'd built a shadow empire. In a single coordinated operation, it was stripped bare. The courtroom was quiet, not because of drama, but because of control. Aram Shaybani sat through every session of his 10-week trial at Manchester Crown Court without protest, without defence, and without a word of explanation. He denied all charges, refused to comment on evidence, and provided no clarity on how he'd amassed a lifestyle worth millions without working a single verifiable job in over 2 decades. The jury heard evidence of mortgage fraud, forgery, drug trafficking, and money laundering. They saw forged documents, encrypted phones, safety deposit boxes, and cash counting machines. They heard from financial experts who tracked luxury purchases across the globe, and cybercrime analysts who linked his movements to crypto wallets and encrypted communications. He was ultimately convicted on 20 charges, including conspiracy to supply Class AA drugs, fraud by false representation, money laundering, and perverting the course of justice. He also faced further penalties for his refusal to unlock encrypted EncroChat devices recovered during the raids. In sentencing, the judge made it clear this was not just a fraudster or a drug dealer. This was a career criminal who had gone to extraordinary lengths to construct and protect a false life. Shaybani was handed a 34-year prison sentence for the core offences, plus an additional 3 years for failing to provide access to digital evidence, bringing the total to 37 years behind bars. But his punishment extended beyond prison. In April 2024, under the Proceeds of Crime Act, the court ordered Shaybani to repay £3.4 million. The ruling was uncompromising. He had 3 months to comply or face an extra 10 years added to his sentence. This figure was calculated based on the value of properties, cash, crypto assets, and other identified criminal proceeds. Police had already seized a portfolio of homes, luxury items, and digital currency. But the confiscation wasn't just about value, it was about justice. The court ruled that none of his wealth was legitimately earned, and every pound linked to crime would be recovered or accounted for. Today, Shaybani sits in a high-security facility. The veneers, the Bentleys, the beach clubs, all gone. What remains is the legacy of a man who fooled the system for years but couldn't outrun it forever. His story is now a warning. No amount of wealth or encryption can shield you from the weight of the truth.